is the last day, the 28th day of February, and we have with us here tonight. I'm Kevin Hoare, by the way, and have with us here tonight a former state representative and leader of the Oregon Citizens Lobby, among many other accolades. We could probably spend half the program recounting all the amazing things that Jeff Kropf does for our state, for the grassroots, and really also to keep us informed as to what's going on his political coffee show on KSLM Monday through Friday, 6 to 7 a.m. So I thought that Jeff might come on tonight to talk to us about that mysterious creature that exists in a building in Salem called the Oregon Legislature and the process that's going on with that, which is exactly what the Oregon Citizens Lobby focuses on, helping people understand and then how to impact it. Jeff, thanks for coming on the program here tonight.
Kevin, great to be with you. I think it's my first time, isn't it?
Yes.
On Captive Audience? I think it
is.
We're
thrilled to have you.
I'm glad it worked out.
And I'm amazed that I didn't think of it before. You know, that's just the crazy things. And I'm like, wait a second, Jeff could tell everybody how the legislature works.
Well, being that you have been into the Oregon Citizens Lobby War Room, as we call it, during the legislative session for a number of years, you're very familiar with what we're trying to accomplish at the grassroots level.
Yep.
That will make a difference across the street in the state capitol. And we do that a number of ways. If you're interested in learning about the Oregon Citizens Lobby, you just go to Oregon Citizens, that's plural, OregonCitizensLobby.org, OregonCitizensLobby.org. And you can go to our website, and we're linked to the state's website, the legislature's website specifically. And our purpose is to really just teach people how, as the average legislator constituent, to just be able to contact your legislator effectively, whether you make a phone call to them, or you come to the Capitol, go face to face with them, or maybe you meet them in a town hall, or maybe you want to go testify at a hearing on a bill, or maybe you just you don't want to do any of those things, but maybe you feel passionately about an issue and you want to submit testimony. We teach you how to do all of that. We teach you how to effectively communicate with your legislator, even if they don't want to talk to you. We teach you those little ambush techniques because, they have to walk from one place to the other in the Capitol building. And sometimes you can just walk next to them, introduce yourself, and in 2 minutes, we teach you how to very articulately get your point across in a powerful way. The same thing is true with testimony in front of a legislative committee. Kevin, I still remember the first time I ever testified in front of a legislative committee. It was in the early 90s. I was farming peppermint, and I hadn't thought about running for office at that time. And I came in to talk about a bill that had to do with peppermint farming. And I sat in the back of the room and watched the professional lobbyists and legislators, go through the pomp and circumstance of, oh, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is, and all that. And, I was a little bit intimidated by it, but I thought, well, if I kind of do the same thing, I'll stumble through it. And I did. I got through it okay. And I have one of the reasons we started the Oregon Citizen Lobby 13, 14 years ago was to teach people, have that kind of confidence to be able to go do that kind of thing. Go to the Capitol, or today, as we do in Oregon, you can testify in person, or you can testify from your home officially on the committee, and everyone will see it, and it's recorded from your home over the internet. And, when I was in the legislature, I got elected in 1999 and served 8 years. We didn't have that capability to do that kind of thing. So it's a great opportunity to do it. And it's one of the things that we teach in the War Room. Now, the War Room used to be in the Capitol building, but they're spending an absurdly ridiculous amount of money rebuilding that building, making it earthquake proof, something like $500+ million. I think we had Representative Kevin Lennox came over to our War Room and shared that with us. In fact, several knowledgeable people say that you could have torn the entire building down and rebuilt it for less than that, considerably. Yeah. Anyway, we used to meet in the Capitol building. we can't for the next couple of years because of the construction. So we're across the street at the Ike Box, Ike as in Dwight Eisenhower, Ike, I-K-E, the Ike Box Coffee House, which is a great coffee house. And we're in a room in the back where we rent that all day on Thursdays. It's every Thursday from 8 a.m. till 3 p.m. in the afternoon. And this coming Thursday, we have Senator Kim Thatcher is going to be joining us to talk about what she expects to happen in this legislative session, and then what are her priority bills, and what are the bills that she thinks that she's introduced that she has a real shot at actually getting through a Democrat-controlled legislature. And what we want to know from her is how we can help her get that done, because that's really the empowerment of what we're trying to do in the Oregon Citizens Lobby is build the capacity just with normal people to be able to help a Kim Thatcher get a great bill run through a Democrat-controlled legislature, or Kevin Mannix also. He's got some very good bills, and there are many others out there. And then there's some not so good bills that we want to talk about tonight, and we want to try to stop them.
Yeah, I think that to a great extent, folks have to know how to speak this special language, which is to convince people, particularly people that might not agree with you on a lot of things, to at least feel that they heard you. And what do they say? If you can't, if you make them feel the heat, they'll see the light type of thing. But there's a way to do it, right? You can't be disrespectful and scream it. I mean, at least Republicans can't get away with that. I know that in Portland, Antifa gets away with anything.
Yeah, Antifa gets a free reign on all that kind of thing. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there is a way to effectively communicate with a legislator who maybe has never met you before. Maybe you're the constituent, maybe you're not, but their vote on a particular bill, maybe in committee, and keeping in mind in Oregon under our Constitution, bills can only be amended in committee. They can't be amended on the floor of the House or the Senate in Oregon. Now, other states are different than that, but Oregon, you have to do it in committee. So maybe there's an important bill in front of a committee, and it really impacts you. What we train you to do, the Oregon Citizen Lobby in the War Room, is to literally walk across the street and go put what you've just learned in practice. So we literally will train people in the War Room and then send them across the street to go talk to legislators and just get used to being a part of that process.
Yeah, and I think the website here is very helpful for anybody who just wants to start going up the learning curve, the OregonCitizensLobby.org website, because right at the top, how to testify, how to register, how to testify remotely, which I think is it's through Microsoft Teams.
It's Microsoft Teams, yeah.
Yep. Yeah. How to submit written testimony. And usually when you testify, you want to do both written and what you say in front of the committee, but then you also want to have a very natural speaking style in front of the committee rather than just reading the thing and then just like you would expect if someone were trying to convince you to see their point of view.
Yeah, no, that is so true. And what we try to teach people to do is there are four main elements in testimony that you want to try to cover. And we teach you those four main elements, and then we literally will have people write out their testimony and then pair up in pairs in the War Room and go ahead and practice it so that the other person can kind of critique you to see if you kind of hit those four important points, but do it in that critical 2-minute time period, because many times that's all that, especially if it's a really controversial bill and there's a lot of people that want to testify, you're only going to get 2 minutes and that's it. So if you have lengthy testimony, be sure to type it up, and there's a procedure, and it's all in the training there. You give copies of it to the committee administrator. They distribute it to the members of the committee, and then what you should do is just summarize it, but summarize it with a little bit of passion and from your heart. Okay, I mean that's so important that you speak from the heart. Especially if you really this is something that's really going to impact your life, then you have to speak from the heart. Again, be respectful, and there's a little pomp and circumstance of how you address the committee chair and the members of the committee, especially if they want to ask you a question after you're done with your testimony. And it's powerful. And I have seen great testimony in my 8 years in the legislature actually begin to move legislators from a position that they had maybe had that they hadn't considered maybe what it is that you have to say. So that's why, testimony is never futile, because especially if you put things on the record, then people can go back to it, especially in litigation. If the legislature passes a bill that is clearly unconstitutional, like they've never before, it gets litigated. And sometimes judges will go back to legislative intent. And so if you're putting things on the record that legislators can then read during their debate on the floor or the House and establishing legislative intent, because maybe you had an angle on it that they hadn't considered. They put that on the record. It has made a difference in judges looking and discerning what is legislative intent in ruling on the legitimacy or constitutionality of law.
Yeah, there's a really good example of this that I experienced. So I submitted some written testimony for Senate Bill 579. It's one of your favorite people, Senator Floyd Przansky of Eugene, Democrat, who's the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. And they have a bill that seeks to make it so that felons can vote from jail, which usually there's different laws in different states, but there's only a handful of states that have it so that people can actually vote from jail. And with vote by mail, that's yet another level of complexity. And other states restore voting rights after someone served their time. Others never. But Oregon, they want to make it so that when you're in jail, you're going to be voting on all of these issues that maybe like laws that you broke. That you don't really care for. They're going to have that. And they have a lot of very woke justifications for this. I'll just summarize it by saying, once you know that the reason why they're saying it is wokeness, well, several of us looked at this and said, okay, we can't come up there and convince Democrats who run the committee to vote against this. But we can find something that they should care about and point it out to them. And one of them is that undue influence is against the law. It's one of the chief criticisms of vote by mail, which is that people can come to your home while you're sitting there with your ballot and put pressure on you. And they can even say, give me your ballot. And if they have some leverage over you, like if you're in a public employee union and they're going to make things difficult for you at work the next day, you might just do it. Well, it's technically illegal. But given all the things that happen in jail, those are people who are in captivity, adults in captivity, as they call them now. And they've got prison guards. There's all kinds of, there's drugs that somehow manage to get into a secure facility. There are gangs that operate within these jails. And so I pointed out in my written testimony that I didn't think that they would want the Aryan Nation Brotherhood gang ballot harvesting in these jails. And that I don't know, maybe they think that's a great idea, but I thought I might get their attention with the undue influence angle. And I wasn't the only person. I got that idea from someone else who spotted that immediately and said, we need to point this out to them. That's what I did in the brief testimony I submitted. And I did that later the same day after I had been at the Oregon Citizens Lobby War Room, where we talked about this issue. And we it wasn't quite a rehearsal because I didn't get that far with what I was planning to say, but we discussed it and it helped me be better at what I wrote up and submitted.
Yeah, that's one of the great examples of when you get people together to talk about legislation, especially if they're people that have had some experience with it. In that particular meeting, at a 911 dispatcher, we had a couple of former police officers, one which is a was a former Oregon Department of Corrections officer.
That's correct.
And both of these guys didn't know that we were going to talk about that bill that day. They just showed up in the war room. So they added a perspective about things. And it's one of the benefits of coming to a group, and we're just an ad hoc group that looks at legislation from a particular, really from 5 core principles, okay? And they are fiscal responsibility, local control, free markets, limited government, personal choice, and responsibility. That's how we look at legislation. And we believe that if we can train up more and more people on our side of the political spectrum, the more conservative, more center-right side, then we can make a difference in legislation in many different ways. And one of the things that Kevin Mannix pointed out when he joined us in the war room was the use of, and former, by the way, State Senator Rick Metzger came out with a piece about this, about Kevin Mannix, poking a little fun at him. Rick was a Democrat when I served, and he poked fun at everybody. He's got a great sense of humor. And he was poking fun at Kevin Mannix a little bit, because Kevin had been in the legislature many, many years ago and been gone, and then he decided to come back, and I'm glad he's there, by the way. But he pointed out that Kevin has such knowledge of the process that one of the things he shared with us was the use of minority reports to advance the cause and of the minority party in floor debate. And there's a whole, and I'm not going to get into it now because there's other things that we probably ought to talk about tonight, but it is one of those little nuances that I had to learn when I came to the process. And Kevin was there and actually was termed out when I was there for my first 2 years. And he was very helpful to me to help guide me kind of through the process about how you use some of the nuances that Oregon's Constitution and our rules that we adopt, Mason's rules, allows us to use, even if we're the minority party. There are things that you can do. One of them is what I'm proud of the Republicans in the Senate, because they're making the Oregon Constitution be adhered to, because the Oregon Constitution says every word of every bill that they're going to vote on has to be read before you can vote on it. When it comes to the actual third reading, we call it, when you actually vote on the bill in the House or the Senate, every word is supposed to be read under Oregon's Constitution. Now, you can get around that, and the way we always got around it is the traditional way, and that is you get unanimous consent of both parties, all members that are there that day, to just say, we're going to waive that rule because the Constitution allows that to happen too. Well, if one member chooses not to give unanimous consent, then you have to read every word. So the Republicans said, all right, if you guys are going to run your radical far left agenda at us, here's what's going to happen. You're going to have to read every single word of every bill. So the other day in the war room, we were watching a 54-page bill being read. Now, it used to be read by a human being. Now they have a computer reading it. But it has to be read at a cadence that you can actually understand it.
Yeah, it sounds like that old FedEx commercial, right? Where
yes.
The
guy, exactly. So we sat there for an hour and a half, actually over 2 hours, and watched that. Nothing happened on the Senate floor because the computer was reading a 54-page bill. They pass 100-page bills in the Oregon legislature, and few people read them.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is not as bad as what they do in Congress, where they pass 2,500-page bills that nobody reads, that has all kinds of stuff in it. But the principle is the same. And I'm glad that they've chosen to do that, because it is one of the few tools that the minority party has. The one tool they had that they used, and I think they should have kept using it, was the quorum requirement to literally walk out, shut the place down. The Democrats did that to us when I served in the legislature.
Sure they
It
did,
was their
yeah.
right to
Led
do it. They
by
did it
led by
effectively.
former state senator Kate Brown, as I recall, in the state
Yes, it
senate.
was, as a matter
Yeah.
of fact. Yeah. So anyway, Kevin and others that come to the war room can share with us what's going on and how we can make a difference, even though Democrats control the legislature. And people need to understand is that Oregon is not as blue as everybody thinks it is. It's a lot more purple. And there were some great examples of that in wins, things that happened, legislators winning, and other things that happened, city councils, school boards that were literally conservative people were elected to them, and now they have the opportunity to stand to take the slings and arrows because that's what will happen to some extent, and you have to be ready for that. And we try to sort of prepare people for that also. If you're ever thinking about running for office, even if it's just city council or school board, being a part of the Oregon Citizen Lobby and understanding this whole process of how you govern is a piece of that puzzle. And that's why you should come and be a part of the war room. We don't do it online. We want people to come and be face to face and have an opportunity to interact like you did and like these other men did that I think helped add into that testimony that you ultimately submitted. And so
Yeah.
that's what we do in the war room. And by the way, one of our war room participants just texted me a reminder from the Northwest Observer story about Will Lathrop, who is a Republican, is going to be running for Attorney General here. In fact, that's what he is doing.
Yep.
We had him speak at another meeting that I host. You've alluded to. I host a lot of meetings, it seems, during these particular times when the legislature's in session. But anyway, he's a great candidate, and hopefully we're going to get him to come to the war room also and participate in the process that we're engaged in.
Yeah, because there's a lot of bills, some of which are at the request of the Attorney General.
Yes.
That actually get it. And
Yes.
so there's Secretary of States, Attorney Generals, they have legislative agendas and they are able to submit them and then get them kind of co-sponsored into the legislature and drive an agenda that they have. Plus, let's face it, there's a lot of things to fix with our system of justice that
Yeah.
are being unfixed right now. By people that are like Floyd Przansky. And by the way, that Senate Bill 579, lo and behold, what made me feel good about the testimony that I submitted and several others was that there's a story from this morning in Chicago where, in fact, undue influence occurred in the Chicago mayoral election. And I know it's Chicago, the places where dead people vote, but we might have them beat on some of that too. But it says Chicago inmates claim guards are pressuring them to vote illegally. This is this morning. The bill is going to be voted on according to OLIS, the Oregon Legislative Information System, the one that we go to find out what's going on. It's being voted on the 2nd. So Thursday at 1 p.m. in the Senate Committee on Judiciary. So
it's only a work session on the bill. I understand it, unless they've changed it. It doesn't allow public input, a
right.
public hearing. But what we need to make sure that what we do, Kevin, is that all of the legislators on the committee need to be aware of that story you just talked about out of Chicago. Okay, because that's a central argument and it needs to be brought up by a member on the committee specifically. So they get that on the record, right?
Yep.
And that's all going back to where this could all lead down the road. Because you never know. You never know how it turns out. You never know if people get a little cold feet when they start reading some of these things, especially the idea that you put forward about letting the Aryan Brotherhood, pressure people to vote in prison, right?
Yep.
The white supremacist in prison. Do you guys really want that? You really want them voting?
Yeah, that's just it. And
Yeah.
And of course, jails are known for having all kinds of things go on. That in fact, one of the people who testified physically at that hearing that I submitted testimony for written She had been a prison guard in the corrections division here in
Mm.
Oregon, and she recounted in her testimony specific examples of what had happened that are on public record now,
Yeah. Yeah.
of people like saying, "I'll get you some more extra food rations if you do this," and it's too easy for someone who's in captivity to be influenced by people that have power over them. So I think that it gave people who are really gangbusters about this bill, love it, some pause. And I think that is one of the things you can do. You could either make a really bad bill a little bit less awful, or maybe you can get them to decide, you know what, let's go back to the drawing boards on this one. Or, as you said, a judge might look at this later and say, you know what, this testimony and this story on the record is making me think maybe they had a point and this law has a problem. And I'm going to make a
Exactly.
different decision.
Exactly. And this is most people just think that the Democrats are going to ram everything through the legislative session. Not so. And what you just pointed out is just one of the ways that the minority party can have an impact down the road, or have an impact. So from the actual legislative process that's occurring. So, for instance, if they go ahead and they pass out this bill out of the Senate and it goes to the House, we have another shot with the House members at bringing up maybe even additional issues that are important to how this is all going to play out. It's also going to cost money too, by the way. The Department of Corrections and the Secretary of State's office, they want more state employees to make this bill work. So to help prisoners literally vote while they're in prison.
Yeah.
There are others and ideas that you're right. One of the things, what California almost did this some years ago, and they chose not to, because the way that particular proposal was written, it would have given prisoners in a state facility in a smaller rural community incredible power to make all kinds of changes in that particular community. Now, the way it works in vote by mail in this proposal is you're going to be voting from your last known address.
Right.
Okay. Well, if your last known address was prison and you'd never been registered to vote for, that's one thing. But if your last known address, if you're over in Snake River in Ontario and you're from Salem, you're going to get a ballot in Ontario that deals with your home area. Okay. But you're still going to be able to vote. And if it's the principle of this, is that this has to do with one of our 5 core principles: personal choice and responsibility. You made a decision to commit a crime. You were convicted of that crime.
Yep.
And for that, you've lost your freedom and a number of other things you cannot do. And voting is one of those things, because there has to be consequences for your actions. If there's no consequences for your actions, you know what happens. Any parent who's ever not disciplined their child knows what happens if the child breaks the family rules and gets away with it. They keep breaking the family rules. So there has to be consequences. And when I am fine. And here's what California did. I'm fine with what California did, or even a suggestion that came out of our war room. And here's what it is. Instead of being able to vote in, when you are transitioning out and you've more time, and there's a transition period that happens typically, then you're allowed to register and to be able to vote during that transition period. Now, California didn't quite do that. What they did is said, while you're on parole, you can vote in California. And I'm fine with that too. You've paid your debt to society. And I think it helps normalize you to get you back into the flow of being a productive citizen, along with getting a job and not going back to the streets and, hanging around with the same old crowd that got you in trouble to begin with. So these are some of the nuances that we could make, suggestions that we could make over on the House side. And if none of that works, then you do the minority report, where the minority party out of the committee has the right to present the same bill with the same relating to clause and the same number, but a different concept. And what happens then is that is considered on the floor on the day you vote for this thing, yes or no. The minority report gets considered first. And I have seen minority reports. Generally, they're not successful, but I have seen them be successful when it's time to go back to the other chamber. Because remember, the House and the Senate both have to pass these legislations, the bills. Okay.
Yep. And,
so
and by the way,
have impact on the other side later.
By the way, all that, including the minority report, impactful testimony, points that were made when bills were being passed that people cast a vote for. And somebody once told me a vote is like a missile. Once you fired it, that's it. It's going to hit the target and it's going to do whatever it does. And if you wish it weren't going to do that, then maybe you shouldn't have voted for it. We can take this stuff to the campaign trail later and point out to voters. That could be an entire ad just out of one of those things they shouldn't have voted for, right?
One of the most effective ads, since I left the legislature, I've worked in grassroots politics doing a number of things, and I still do. I also help candidates learn how to be a good candidate and be effective at communicating. And one of the things is you have to use very skillfully those types of opportunities. If a candidate stands up on the floor of the House of Representatives and says something really stupid, like I've done, okay, admittedly.
Who hasn't?
Yeah, I'll tell you. Believe me, your wife will remind you when you've said something stupid. Well, it's
imperfections, indeed.
It's more lasting. Well, I wouldn't say it's more lasting. It's just as lasting because it's in perpetuity forever because all of this stuff is archived, right?
Oh, yeah.
Every word we say, every word I ever spoke on the House of Representatives is archived. Every costume I ever wore on the House of Representatives, that's a whole other show. All of that.
We'll come back to that.
Yeah, we'll come back to that someday. All of that is something that can be skillfully used. And the most effective commercial that I'm convinced got Lori Chavez DeRemer, who, by the way, this Thursday night is going to be one of our 2 keynote speakers at another meeting that I host. This is the long time, since the 70s, the Executive Club meeting. It's invitation only, up at the Portland Airport Shiloh Inn. She's Oregon's newest congresswoman. Well, that's Republican anyway, okay? And she's going to be joining us to talk about what it's like to be a freshman Republican woman back in the Republican caucus, and then, having the power fight that happened and all of that, and her sense of where things are headed, and she'll take questions. And then also speaking with her is Joe Kent, who narrowly lost his opportunity to go, across the river in Vancouver to go back to be a part of Congress. He's already filed to run again, and he's going to be sharing with us how he knows he can win this time and the strategy to do that. So that is this coming Thursday night, Portland Airport Shiloh Inn. If people want to come to it, it's at 7 p.m., right?
7 p.m. 7 p.m.
It goes from 7 to 8:30. Come early, eat dinner in the room. It's in the main ballroom next to the restaurant. Those are the Portland Airport Shiloh Inn. Begins at 7 o'clock, ends at 8:30. So, at any rate, that ad that I'm convinced that her campaign ran of tying her opponent to endorsing the Antifa rioters destroying downtown Portland. And they showed clips of them doing it, and they showed her endorsing them and the things that she said. I am absolutely convinced that tipped the scales in Lori's favor. Okay. And I think that those kinds of things, as you pointed out, when we do these arguments that are made then in committee, they're made by submitting written testimony. They're then made in other strategies like minority reports. Those can be used in future elections because it's like record and it's all fair game. You don't have to engage in character assassination. All Lori Chavez DeRemer's campaign did was literally quote what her opponent had said about endorsing the violent destruction of downtown Portland. Okay.
Yeah.
That's all fair game. So don't ever think that your testimony or being process is futile, because it is not.
Yeah, that's right. And so one thing I wanted to mention about the Oregon Citizens Lobby website is that you can sign up for a legislative bill alerts. You can go by category. It's like agriculture, environment, natural resources, economic development, land use, education, elections, which a lot of people pay attention to, energy and transportation, government operations, health and welfare, law enforcement, military and firearms, taxes and fees. You can sign up and follow and get updates on the key bills, get alerts about them so that you can react in time to take action. We know that the Democrats like to do it sometimes where there's almost no warning that they're going to go
Right.
and hold a hearing. People have to drive many hours from parts of the state. Fortunately, now you can do this remote testimony, and you can also, for I think 24 hours after the hearing's over, submit written testimony.
Yes, 24
But
hours.
these alerts will help you stay on track and on top of what's going on, which is so hard to do.
That's
But
right.
people are doing this work for us.
That's exactly right. And it's some of the bills that we should probably touch on here before we're finished tonight have to do with issues that affect everybody, such as this House Bill 3152 that basically takes the Public Utility Commission. These are the people that regulate our natural gas rates, our electrical rates, all of that, basically turns them into another arm of the radical climate agenda. Okay? That's what this bill is going to do. It is basically going to, as it says, ensure that the commission's regulation, rules, and orders and programs align with the governor's executive orders on greenhouse gas emissions. So this is another tool whereby they can dramatically increase our cost of living through the Public Utility Commission by policies that will come out of this and that align with executive orders that many of us believe are absolute. And there are lawsuits winding their way through the Oregon courts right now that those executive orders are unconstitutional.
That's right.
Because they literally take the place of law. And that's not constitutional under our separation of powers in the Oregon Constitution. That's one of the bills. Then you got House Bill 2601 that requires the state treasurer to take Oregon's investments, which are mostly the Public Employees Retirement System investments. There are some others, but to literally divest any money in any certain carbon intensive investments.
Like
So,
PERS.
Like
PERS would have to divest.
PERS will have to go green. So if PERS, which is upside down, okay, by billions of dollars, if PERS is making money from a carbon intensive investment, this bill is going to make them divest from that and perhaps put money in green power, maybe offshore wind power, which, as we're hearing on the East Coast, is killing all kinds of whales and dolphins these days.
Yep.
We know it kills eagles because there are wind turbine companies in Eastern Oregon that are settling lawsuits and paying fines to the federal government for killing bald eagles, okay, and other birds that are endangered. So this is just another idea to make everything in Oregon one of two things. It's either racist or it's not good for the environment.
Yeah.
Everything that this bunch that's in charge of the legislature right now, including this governor, everything they're doing has those two main themes behind it. Doesn't matter what it is. You pointed out something too here, and why don't you talk about resilient buildings? Because you hit on something that's gonna happen.
That's right. So many people have heard about the effort to ban natural gas in Eugene. They passed a city ordinance with the intent of making it so that new residential buildings would no longer have the ability to install access to or even get a line to the building for having natural gas, because they've decided natural gas is evil, except that's what everybody wants. And it's what they like for their living standards. But in 2020, Two, there was a bill that was going to maybe do this, rewrite the state building codes, and they turned it into instead a commission, which bought us some time. The commission, sorry, it was a joint committee. It met 18 times. It was called the Resilient Buildings Committee. And they essentially studied and came out with a report in December, which is going to, which proposes to essentially make it that whatever happened in Eugene, it'll be easy to do and even required to do everywhere. And then they'll start throwing money at it to incentivize compliance in the different cities. Well, we knew that a bill was going to come from this joint committee. There was no way that we're just going to have 18 meetings and nothing was going to come from it. Then I found these 3 bills with the help of one of the legislative assistants to Lynn Finley, who is sponsoring a bill to ban local natural gas bans. He's hoping to get a hearing on that, by the way, because he's on the committee in the Senate. These 3 bills, Senate Bill 868, 869, and 871, popped up right around after about the 18th, 21st, something like that of February. And when they had the deadline, you had to have bills actually come forward by then. And these 3 bills, I will post what they say here in the feed. They all say pretty much the same thing. They say requires Department of Consumer and Business Services to study how to build resiliency into buildings, directs department to submit findings to interim committees of legislative assembly related to the environment not later than 15 September 2024. So 2 of the bills say that. Another one is a slight twist on that. And in the end, you're like, well, why do we have 3 bills that say the same thing? And where's the bill that takes everything that they had in this terrible report? And why aren't we able to see that and debate it? The answer is they're going to take these 3 bills, which have what's called a relating to clause, and they're going to take out all the crap that they just said in here because they've already studied it.
Right.
And they're going to stuff it with whatever they want because they're the majority party and they can. And then they're going to bring it to a committee and shove them through. And it's going to be all the stuff that they've been fighting Eugene, but spread statewide. And we actually don't know what the details of the bill are yet because they can hide it. And gut and stuffs are a tool that they use to incubate really bad stuff until late in the session. And then sometimes they even take bills that you thought were good and they turn them into bad bills, right? And then they pass those.
Yeah.
And I think people will be shocked what they mean by resilient buildings. They don't mean resilient. They mean green.
They mean woke, absolutely green. Yeah.
Yes.
And
woke.
And woke. Yeah. So what everybody needs to understand is that Oregon's Constitution says that every legislation has to have a constitutional requirement of what's called a relating to clause. It has to be written to it. So if you look at all 3 of these bills that he's just mentioned, 868, 869, and 871, these are Senate bills. So there'll be SB, Senate Bill 868, 869, 871. They all have the same identical relating to clause. Okay. So that's the first big red flag. But the point you pointed out is this offers them the opportunity very late in the session, if they want, to do what's called the gut and stuff. And that's where the majority party has amendments drawn up in committee that they don't tell the minority party about. And they literally hold a meeting and they say, we have amendments, and the amendments take all of the original language out of the bill and put new language in the bill that fits in that relating to clause. Okay. And so that's what a gut and stuff is. And we used to do it when I was there also, not for nefarious purposes like this. And I would not be surprised if the scenario you just described, that what Eugene has done and some other municipalities in banning new natural gas hookups would be one of these bills that they would gut and stuff because it relates to a resilient building, efficient building. Not having natural gas, having solar power would be, or all green power would be fitting within that relating to clause. So they could literally gut all the language of this thing, put in anything they want, ram it through, and it become the law of Oregon. That's what a gutting stuff is. And that's why they do bills like this. It's basically just a placeholder bill. And you point out very clearly the obvious giveaway is that they had this commission, right, for 18 months that met, and they came up with this big report, but that's not in the bills.
No, that's right. And I think the relating to clause usually is how they steer it to a committee, which, as we said, that's where all the power is. That's where all the decisions are made as to what will and will not be in the bill. It also is a great way to hide it from public scrutiny and prevent people who might be really upset about it from knowing about it in time to educate the public and to organize a response. So this is why we're telling everybody today about it, because you need to pay attention to this.
Right.
They're going to sneak this in. And I just posted a list of the deadlines that exist during the legislature. These bills will, and by the way, the co-sponsors, Senator Lieber, Kate Lieber, and Representative Marsh. Senator Lieber is the majority leader of the Democrats in the Senate, and she and Representative Marsh were the Democrat chairs of the joint committee that came up with all this. So this is what I mean, it's, we can see it coming like a train with a bright light on the front of it coming our way. But they have to get it. They get it assigned to a committee and post a public hearing by the 17th of March. So these things don't have a hearing scheduled, but they will have to technically by the 17th of March. So we may see something develop in the next, 3 weeks on this as to what's in
likely it. So, and what you'll see happen in the last few days of most committees just before that deadline is something. I was committee chair of the House Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee for 4 years. So what you do is if you have some bills that you want to hear after the deadline to have your first hearing, then you just do a quick tap in, tap out, tap in, tap out. And it's, you have this whole stack of bills and a list of them. And you say, Senate Bill 868, public hearings open, public hearings close. Senate Bill 869, public hearing, close. So you're not really holding a public hearing, but you're tapping it in so that you can have a public hearing down the road after the deadline. Because what most people don't understand is that the only good thing that came out of changing Oregon's constitution to doing yearly sessions, a long session and a short session, the only good thing is the time limit. Because when I was in the legislature, I went through the longest session in Oregon's history, from the second week in January till August 27th, almost the 1st of September. Okay. I had harvested all my crops and I had planted my new crop by that time, almost. Okay. So you have to get it done in a timely manner. All right. Now, that doesn't limit the numbers of bills. There's an unlimited number of bills that can be introduced in a legislative session, but only so many of them are ever going to have a hearing. But if you have bills like this that are just placeholders, and they are, they're going to be there for the gut and stuff down the road, then you just tap in, tap out, tap in, tap out, and you get it done in one of your last hearings. And then you can hold regular hearings if that's what you're going to do on a particular bill down the road. But you have to start shutting down the process at certain times so that legislators just don't keep coming up and flooding, bills. Congress is not that way.
No, Congress is like a rolling.
It never ends. Okay.
Yeah.
But the Oregon legislature has to. So there's a bill deadline where legislators can submit bills. And every legislator, House or Senate, gets just two priority bills after that deadline. Okay. So if something happened in your legislative district, maybe a forest fire, okay, or a train wreck, okay, not that that's ever happened before, and you needed to deal with that, and everybody thought, yeah, we need to deal with it, and here's a bill that does that, then you as a legislator would use one of your priority bills to do that kind of thing. So you hold them kind of towards the end of the session. If you have someone who has an association or a business group, like me as a fifth generation Oregon farmer, if Oregon Farm Bureau came to me with a bill that they really needed to get done, they talked to the other side, and the other side, yeah, we're willing to do this. Then they would come to me, and I would give them a priority bill towards the end of the session. We'd get it drafted. It then doesn't go to that committee, because committees start they have to have their hearings, and then they have to start shutting down at certain periods of time. There's only two committees that stay open through the end of it, and that's the Rules Committee in both the House and the Senate, and
Ways and Means.
The Ways and Means, that the people who write the checks. And I used to sit on all 8 years on Ways and Means committees. And so because at the end of the session, it's all about money and power. Right?
Yeah.
And that's what legislative session is. Let's be honest. And at the end of it, you have to do budgets. In fact, in Oregon's Constitution, Kevin, that's the only thing we are required to do as a legislature when they meet, is to produce a budget. That's the only thing. We don't have to do any policy bills at all. That's optional. Now, we end up doing far more policy bills than we do budget bills, but
4,000 bills that they end up with that's where we're at now, is that these dates start to pare that down and force them to pick the ones that are actually going to live on and reach the floor in both chambers. Because that's the other thing, is you have to get it out of the first chamber. What is it, by the 4th of April, something like that, to get it to the second chamber.
So here's the problem that I think can be solved with a limit on the number of bills that can be introduced. Is you need to have a constitutional limit, I think, on the numbers of bills that can be introduced, in both the House and the Senate. You can up the number of priority bills, but what most people don't realize is that the governor or the attorney general or the secretary of state or the treasurer can request that bills get introduced on their behalf, on behalf of the executive branch. Now, I've never liked that idea. And I think that here's what's interesting, is that those agencies get their bills typically heard first.
Yeah.
Before a bill gets heard that maybe comes from your constituent that's really important in your legislative district. And I've always had a problem with that. And I think that constitutionally that needs to be addressed. That's a heavy lift to get people to vote for that. But I think if you could design it such a way that the main message is it limits the numbers of bills that the legislature can introduce, because there are some really bad examples of legislators signing on to hundreds and hundreds of bills, literally.
Yeah.
And being the sole sponsor of, I know one particular legislator that I'm not going to name, was bragging about over 150 bills that person authored by themselves.
Yeah.
Okay? That's crazy. You don't need to do that. So there are ways that we can mitigate this, and we should mitigate it down the road. But the main message I want the listening audience to take from this is that this is still your government. Okay? Yeah, those people may run the House and the Senate, but there's all kinds of tools that you can use to not only get your voice heard, but make it so that your testimony, your thoughts, your passion about an issue is known to the legislature. And you never know how that plays out. You never know when you plant a seed in a legislator that later grows and it moves them to some place that maybe they hadn't thought they would go to on a particular issue. And so don't ever think that your testimony or your being an activist in the legislative process, whether it's testifying at home from in front of your computer to a committee, or it's meeting up in a town hall meeting with your legislator, okay? Don't ever think it's futile, because it isn't. Because you know what? The one thing I've learned, and you know this from your testimony and observing the legislature, is that if you're silent, if the silent majority is silent, the people that get it done are the people who show up.
Yeah, the
And
squeaky wheel.
Exactly, like this bill to give prisoners the right to vote while they're in prison. Most of the people there to testify was this long list of liberal groups thinking it's a wonderful idea, talking about how wonderful it is and how it restores and it's constitutional and this and that and the next thing. There were only a handful of people who opposed it at that legislative hearing. Okay.
Yep.
That's a travesty. And if bills like that, ideas like that really get you fired up, maybe it's Second Amendment stuff. We know there's going to be Second Amendment bills, probably gutting stuffs at the end of the legislative session, probably to try to do what Measure 114 is likely going to be struck down from doing because it is blatantly unconstitutional. If you're passionate about those things, then you need to be engaged and involved, and you need to influence other people in your circle, in your family, in your friends, people that you work with, to be a part of it. And you can do it. And one of the ways you can do this at the citizen level is if you don't like the idea of having to pay a toll on a road that's already been built and paid for in Oregon, like I-205, I-5 up in the Portland metro area, then you need to go to a website and sign a petition. It's called votebeforetolls.org. Votebeforetolls.org. And you can download a petition. This is going to change the whole, if we can get this on the ballot, and it'll pass big. Okay?
We know the polling tells us that already.
We know that for years. The whole idea of paying tolls, that liberals in Portland who drive cars hate the idea. Okay.
Yep.
So all we have to do is get this on the ballot, Kevin. And one of the ways that you can do that is you can download the initiative. There's complete instructions there, how you do it the right way, so your signatures don't get thrown out. And get your family members' signatures and get other people's signatures. And we have until 2024 to turn in like 200,000 signatures to get this on the ballot. If we do that, it doesn't say that you can't toll. It just say that the people get to vote on it in a region first. Okay. Yep. Let the people vote on it. Let their voice be heard. That's one of many ways that you can be effective as a citizen, as an activist. Come to the Oregon Citizens Lobby War Room on Thursday at the Ike Box. It's in the Bay Room, clear behind the stage on the ground floor. We have coffee, and invariably people buy wonderful donuts and bring them in. And I usually have one or two. I shouldn't, but I do.
Me. Yeah, I've managed to stay clear of those, but it's tempting.
They're very tempting. So I want to encourage you to come and join us. Keep listening to this show, Captive Audience, and turn other people onto it, because it's very informative, and it's an opportunity for you to be encouraged. All is not lost. Oregon is not as blue as people think. And that's a whole nother show for another day.
And we can boost the people who are actually fighting the good fight for us. You just reminded me, there's actually a bill to repeal Measure 110. I think Kevin Mannix is the guy that is putting that forward, and there's co-sponsors. You could testify in favor of that. Guess what? That could have an impact, and maybe if it doesn't pass the legislature, who knows? Maybe it'll end up people getting signatures and getting on the ballot. We'll see.
That's right. That's right.
We know that's made a big difference too. Jeff, one more time, Executive Club. Just want to let folks know it is this Thursday, 7 p.m., Shiloh Inn, Airport Way, and you're going to be hearing from Congresswoman Lori Chavez DeRemer of the 5th Congressional District, and you're going to be hearing from congressional candidate, 2022 congressional candidate, and soon to be 2024 congressional candidate, Southwest Washington District, Joe Kent. Did I get all that?
Yep, you did. That's perfect. Thank you very much. Yeah. It'll be a great night. Come and join us. Come early, have dinner.
Absolutely. It's a great event and a great place to be. And then hopefully I'll see some of the folks that are watching us at the Oregon Citizens Lobby as well this week. I'm looking forward to that too. Thank you so much for being on with us.
By the way, Kim Thatcher will be joining us about 2:30 in the afternoon. I confirmed that with her staff. So if you want to specifically interact with Kim, Senator Thatcher, then come about, say about 2:00 or so, and she'll be there about 2:30, and she'll have about 45 minutes with us.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to that too.
Me
Thanks
too.
again. And thanks for joining us on short notice. But I think we gave people a ton of information about how
I
they can
hope so.
affect the process and some hope that there's a way to do it.
That's
Thanks
right.
again for joining
You bet.
us.
Thank you, Kevin.
And thanks everyone for watching. Please share this show with everyone you can. There's a lot of folks who don't know any of this and they need to know it, and you can help them.
Right.
You can be the person that informed them. We will see you again tomorrow night on the next episode of The Captive Audience. Sunny Danforth and Don Anderson will be on. And we wish you a fine evening. Thanks, everyone.